Hello, folks. Welcome and happy Thursday. As you come on in, go ahead, get settled, maybe grab a LaCroix or a Diet Coke or whatever you need to feel comfortable. Situate yourself. And then what I'm going to have everyone do is open up the chat, not the Q&A. Open up the chat, and then you're going to introduce yourself. You're going to put in your name, your role, your institution, and then we're gonna go ahead and start with a pop quiz because we're educators at the end of the day. Go ahead and put one adjective to describe how you feel about AI and education. And in case you are not familiar with Schoolhouse Rock, adjective is the kind of word that describes. So describe how you're feeling. Do you remember that Schoolhouse Rock song? Yeah. I taught high school, I swear. Come on in, welcome, happy Thursday. Before we get started, I'll wait for a few more folks to file in. Great to see people introducing themselves in the chat. Hello, I'm seeing if there are any familiar names in there. Hello, hello, hello. All right, well, we will get started so that we can start on time and end on time. So some housekeeping, the webinar recording and a follow along asynchronous guide that you'll actually use today, it's going to be shared with all attendees and folks who fill out the form. So if you have colleagues, peers that didn't get to attend today and you feel like could benefit from this, you can send them the registration page and they'll get the recording, they'll get the guide. Everything is on packback.co/webinars. So if you really like this workshop, there are more that you can come to. Yay. What I'm going to ask that you do is ask all of your questions in the Q&A feature. You can go ahead and answer each other's questions. You can upvote. You can, I don't think you could downvote, but you could definitely upvote. But use the Q&A for questions. And then for the chat, have a lively discussion. Something really cool that happened the last time we were all together is that some folks kind of, I think, networked and ended up having an offline discussion about a week later to college professors. So definitely, if you notice someone in the chat that you feel like sounds like-minded or maybe different and you want to learn from them, reach out. Use this as an opportunity to connect and network. Use the chat, like I said, share, reflect. We don't limit the chat, so it's your safe space. And then the panelists all here will be monitoring the Q&A and using the chat throughout the webinar. We might hold a question till later. That's totally fine. We're going to have an entire Q&A section later after we're done with the workshop. So welcome. We'll go ahead and do some introductions. So my name is Kelsey Berenger. I am the CEO over at Packback. If you are unfamiliar with Packback, we are an AI-powered writing and discussion platform that's used in higher education and K through 12. But, you know, a lot of AI you're familiar with today is very generative. It's giving students the fish. What we want to do at Packback is teach students how to fish. So excited to be here today. My background is in K-12 education. I was a high school teacher, so feel particularly passionate about equipping educators with good resources. Rye.
Thanks, Kelsey. My name is Rye. I'm a curriculum consultant here at Packback. I work with hundreds of instructors all across the country. I'm a former middle school English teacher, and I'm a proud generative AI user, especially when I don't know what to have for dinner and I tell ChatGPT all of the ingredients in my fridge so it can decide for me.
That's great. I'm Cynthia Wilson. I'm Vice President for Learning and Chief Impact Officer at the League for Innovation in the Community College. I also have a faculty background. I spent 20 years as a faculty member before I joined the League staff a few years ago. So happy to be here. Happy to see everybody again.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And just a highlight of today's agenda, there's a lot on the list, but we're going to move through pretty rapidly. We're going to hear an introduction from Cynthia. And again, I cannot express enough gratitude and awe and pride in the work that we've been able to do with the League. I love your organization. It's been a pleasure to work together. We're going to hear some updates on the generative AI front. There was kind of a figurative bomb that was dropped on us in the generative AI world this week. We're going to talk about why we need generative AI policies, and we're actually going to give voice to someone who we haven't maybe heard from all summer, which is the student. We're going to talk about how students can actually ethically use AI before we look at policies and develop our own policies. So there will be 10 to 15 minutes of silent individual active work guide or work time where you'll get a guide and you'll draft a policy with a guided activity. So we'll end with a Q&A, and we might be out in an hour, we might be out in 45-50 minutes because some of this is quite simple thanks to the guide we put together. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Cynthia for our introduction.
Thanks. I lost my unmute button there for a minute, so I apologize. But again, welcome back, everyone. I'm so glad you could join us for the second workshop in our series responding to the rise of generative AI like ChatGPT. In our first workshop, we explored strategies for creating assessments that prevent misuse of generative AI by focusing on assignments that develop critical thinking skills and empower the student voice. Today, we'll be tackling the second major request that came out of our survey last spring, guidance on creating clear, ethical, and realistic AI policies for your courses. With new AI tools emerging at a breakneck pace, setting comprehensive policies can feel daunting, but taking the time to develop thoughtful guidelines will pay dividends down the road as you navigate ongoing challenges and opportunities. Our goal by the end of this session is for each of you to walk away with a draft AI policy outline that you can customize for your specific disciplines. We'll cover best practices for areas like academic integrity, data privacy, and access. And as we dive in, I encourage you to continue bringing the open mindset that has driven our community's engagement thus far. Ask questions with the Q&A feature, share your thoughts and ideas in the chat, and as Kelsey mentioned earlier, make some connections with others that you see in the chat who grab your attention. So as we continue to embrace this challenge together, I look forward to seeing the innovative policies that emerge over the next hour and to continue supporting the community and innovation during such a dynamic time in education. Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you so much. I'm excited. The past few webinars have been really wonderful in hearing from the spectrum of educators and our sentiment towards generative AI. So it feels like every week we're learning more, we're becoming more comfortable, and we're just deciding how we want to move about this. And I think a lot of how we're learning and moving forward is largely due to the community around us. I have had a couple of questions come in, so I want to address them, but we have been doing workshops alongside the league, and we've also been doing these podcast style webinars. So workshop for the GPT proof assignment, that was July 20th. If you go to packback.co/webinars, you can download the recording and the follow-along guide. You just have to fill out the form. The recording, the deck, the guide, and a certificate of attendance will all be sent afterwards. So if you are attending today, you're going to get an email with a ton of resources. Again, that's the deck we've used, the recording, the follow-along guide for the workshop, and a certificate of attendance. And then these podcast style webinars, they're kind of just like, what's news? Let's talk about the news. Let's have some AI experts and some educators on a panel sort of vibe. That's going to be July 20th. That's recorded. You can access that again on packback.co/webinars, and then August 17th. So I want to just do a quick disclosure real quick about the term generative AI. So you're going to see and hear and read that we're very thoughtful about using the term generative AI to describe things like ChatGPT, Bard, Claude. The reason why we don't just use the term AI is because AI is everywhere. It's an Uber. It's our grammar checker. It is when I'm typing on my cell phone, it auto-completes or it auto-corrects. That is AI. So when we're thinking about AI, and as we're writing policies and we say, hey, you must disclose the use of AI, that would technically mean that students would have to disclose if they Ubered to class that day, right? And we don't mean that. What we mean is we want them to disclose use of generative AI. So I'm going to be hyper specific in that capacity of generative AI. That is the type of AI that writes after been giving a prompt or creates content from a prompt like DALL-E or Midjourney. Now we're going to start with a poll just to see where we're all at. I have 4 questions. I'm going to launch it right now. There are 4 questions you're going to answer. How often would you like or allow your students to use generative AI in your course? Will you require use of generative AI? Do you have an idea of how you'd like your students to disclose use of generative AI? That's basically cite AI as a source. And then how would you describe your familiarity with generative AI? So go ahead, answer those questions. I'll give everyone about 2 minutes and then I'll expose the results. It's all anonymous, don't worry. I'm seeing that about 10% of us are generative AI obsessed, which I would agree with. I've gotten there in my journey. Also, something you're going to hear as a theme is that we don't have to require generative AI use in our courses, nor even recommend generative AI uses in our courses, but we can still allow for limited use. And we're going to talk about that and dig into that today of we might be able to say, hey, if you want to use generative AI to explain a confusing concept to you, that's fine, but you should not be using it for XYZ reason. I'm not requiring it, I'm not recommending it, but this is the one way where I would be okay if that happened. So we're gonna kind of talk about that concept often today. So I'll give everyone another maybe 5-ish seconds for the poll, and then I want to deliver the results. Awesome. Let me share results and everyone should be able to see this. There we go. 4 questions. So it sounds like, how often would you like or allow your students to use generative AI? It seems like majority of us are in the occasionally often bucket. Will you require use? Seems like about 20% of us are saying yes. Again, you don't have to require use in order to be okay with certain uses. I want to make that clear. It's kind of like office hours. Office hours aren't required, but students can come. Well, it's a little bit different, I should say. Do you have an idea of how you'd like students to disclose generative AI use? Thank you for being here to figure that out. And then familiarity. Okay, we've got a spectrum here, which makes sense. I'll keep those results shared until we hit our next poll. So I want to just give a quick update that I actually heard from in The Neuron, which is a great AI newsletter that comes to your email every day. I'd highly recommend it. You just have to subscribe at theneuron.com, or maybe it's like The Neuron AI. And that is that OpenAI, the creators of ChatGPT, have quietly shut down their AI text detection tool. So if you remember, it was quite controversial back in January when they launched this detection tool because they claimed it was 26% accurate with a 9% false positive rate. Now, in the statement where they're actually shutting down their AI text detection, or I should say like kind of quietly quitting, they've also made a commitment to develop and deploy mechanisms that enable users to understand if audio or visual content is AI generated. Now, I'm not trying to make a big statement here, but it is food for thought as we think about the future of AI text detection. And what I would say, my recommendation as a former instructor and tech enthusiast, is to not put all of our eggs in this basket and have a really, I would say, robust process when we do suspect AI generated text in student work. Now let's talk about how we need why we need generative AI policies. So I'm going to shed a light on 3 different student voices. One is going to be from an interview I got from a Canadian news source. The other is going to be from a podcast, and the last is going to be a written piece of work. And we're actually going to hear from students because I think understanding where our students are coming from is going to give us a lot of context as why we need generative AI policies and really what our generative AI policies should look like at the end of the day. So up first, we're going to listen to one extreme, which is an anonymous student, and you're going to know why they're anonymous in a moment, talking about their understanding of ChatGPT. So this is about 2 minutes.
You don't feel like you kind of cheated yourself out of learning by using ChatGPT in these ways?
I didn't really feel that bad about it, to be honest. If GPA is everything, then students are only going to care about grades, and GPA is pretty much everything. your internship applications, your job applications, like they literally have all these like GPA requirements. So I feel like it's that emphasis on grading and GPA that pushes students to use whatever means that they can.
College, we pay hella money, right? We're just trying to get a degree. That's it, credentials. Just like, I'm stressed. I really need to get this degree so I can get a job, so I can like survive. Oh man, oh. So when that's your mindset, then it's really hard to like, be like, oh, knowledge, let's learn, everybody, yeah.
Well, what would you say to students who might say it's not fair that you use ChatGPT like this?
I mean, I can understand feeling pissed off when you did all that work and you found out that other people like got there easier, right? And it just makes you feel like all your work was invalidated, right?
I understand your feelings of like unfairness, because I also used to feel that way too, but it's like the whole world is unfair already. People are going to get jobs and get picked for positions just off of knowing someone or some weird connection or whatever. Like the system is already unfair. So it's up to you to try and like get it how you get it.
I would say,
So I'm going to pause that there. When we're thinking about the student who is using generative AI, and maybe let's say the least academically honest way, that's the perspective. Not trying to, come after you as an educator and sacrifice their relationship with you. It's the game. They're playing the game. Now I want to take an exact opposite perspective here. I want to show you one student who feels, again, the exact opposite about this.
When you're using Grammarly or any of those other tools that are there to help you with your writing, you still need to know how to write. But this tool where it's like creating something completely new for you, that's plagiarism. It's taking somebody else's idea, even if it's a computer's idea, and creating it and then submitting it. You're not actually learning anything. The whole point of writing an essay is showing that you have learned the content and that you're able to express that through your writing. So if you're getting a computer to do it for you, you've learned nothing. You're expressing nothing.
So you can hear this is the exact opposite, right? And this is probably a student who worked quite hard to get exactly where they are in their experience, and they want to be where they are because they value learning and the process of learning, all right? Now, the final student voice I want to show was also actually featured on this episode of The Daily, so I'd highly recommend listening to that. But this student is, I think, either a sophomore or junior at UCLA this fall. It's from Aliana that she wrote this. I am a bit of a technophobe. Computer science majors seem like superheroes to me. Same. It would be brilliant if, instead of having to figure this all out on my own, AI could be integrated into my education. I'm not asking for a full-fledged academic AI revolution in which we're expected to use AI in all of our work. I just want to be prepared to navigate the AI-fueled future. Teach me how to streamline my research process through AI. Explain to me what questions to ask AI chatbots to get the most helpful responses. Show me how I can use these resources to improve my administrative efficiency and my data analysis. Help me receive edits and constructive criticism from AI. Prepare me for the real world where AI is beginning to touch all areas of work. Absolutely love this. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to my wonderful colleague, Rye, to take it from here.
Awesome, thank you. So I want to pause and do a bit of a reflection. We just heard from 3 different student voices. I want to know, how do you relate to these student perspectives? How do you not relate to these student perspectives? How you relate to your students will directly impact how you develop these policies and what we're doing today. So take a few minutes, write down your answers, and if you're comfortable, share them in the chat. Awesome. I'm seeing a lot of different answers actually here. A lot of you resonate with that second student. A lot of you are mentioning that this kind of represents the kind of overall, like the diversity of your students kind of in general. I did see a question that was asking, so what's the average vibe from the students? So let's talk about that. In what we've discovered, kind of through listening to students, through talking to instructors, is that it is not a student's #1 priority to attend school to cheat. Students do genuinely want to learn new things and develop their skills. Most students are curious about how generative AI works, just as you may be attending these webinars to learn more about generative AI. Students are just as curious and want to be taught how to use these tools so they can be a more competitive student and professional, right? Age doesn't define digital literacy. I'm a millennial myself, and though I consider myself very literate in lots of different technologies, TikTok was new to me when TikTok came on the market. ChatGPT was new to me back in November. These tools are likely new to your students as they are new to you. You know, your students come from a diverse background, so we can't assume that all of them know how to use these tools properly or even know how to use them at all. And then, of course, generative AI bans don't deter generative AI use. So let's talk about some ways that you can teach your students how to use generative AI in an ethical way. If you didn't get to attend our last webinar, shameless plug here, go check out my segment on developing authentic assessments. We talk in depth in that webinar about ChatGPT proofing your course this fall. So students could use it as a brainstorming tool. Like I mentioned in my introduction, I often use ChatGPT to help me come up with ideas for dinner by telling it what I have in my fridge. Students could do something similar related to your content. They could have AI build them outlines for a paper. Students can write their own thesis statements with you in class and then ask the AI to build an outline for a really well laid out and organized essay. They could ask AI for explanations. You could encourage your students to, take notes in class and then prompt the AI to explain concepts in further detail when they got home for a really awesome AI-centered homework, right? They could prompt the AI something like, explain thermodynamics to me like I'm 5. And then maybe they even bring that back to class to you the next day and you can talk about it. They could use AI to get basic writing feedback on things like grammar and readability, or even have it look for things like logical fallacies, which is really cool. Using Claude AI, which I know Kelsey is a big fan of, students can upload your rubric, your writing prompt, and then their draft, and have the AI provide real-time feedback against your rubric, which would obviously lead to better final drafts. Awesome, so let's take a poll.
All right, I just launched the second poll. Oh, sorry, it's called poll number 2 for real, because there's a fake poll number 2, by the way. Poll number 2. What's your sentiment towards students using generative AI in your course this fall? Again, not necessarily do you want to require it and teach about it, but just what might you allow them to do? And then second is just how would you anticipate or allow or even recommend your students use generative AI? What tasks? Now, I saw a really great question in the chat, or I should say note of, isn't developing an outline for something, isn't that a human critical thinking skill? And yeah, absolutely. So I think it really depends on what you want to teach your students and what your course objectives are. Because if developing a strong outline is a skill that you want to teach your students and you want them to do on their own without AI, tell them that. And then say maybe in your next class where how you go from outline to first draft, second draft, third draft is the main goal, start using AI there. But until you can develop a good outline, don't start using AI until you're comfortable with your own skills. So I think it just really depends on your course objectives, your goals, because I personally like to use generative AI to develop outlines, and I like to write from the outline that generative AI gives me after modifying it slightly. And you know what? If there's no good use for generative AI in your course, that is fine. I think the most important thing we do is just explain to students why. And that's going to be a large part of the policy that we'll talk about shortly. Brandon, I like that. And I think too, one of the students I was chatting with, I was just at a conference the past 2 days, was in order to even use AI to generate a good outline, I need to know what a good outline is. So I first need to know how to write my own outlines. I need to know how to evaluate outlines. Then I could use generative AI for outlines. So I think that's an important thing that we keep in mind, is just because AI can do something for us, we still need to be able to evaluate if things are good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. You can take a look. So let's talk about AI policy examples. These are LinkedIn, and I'm not going to go through the policy in depth because we'd be here until the sun went down. But this is a really cool story coming from Boston University. About 50 students in a course on data ethics and society, and I think it's the computer science department. They authored a generative AI policy. And the entire department has adopted it. It's not the institution's policy, so I want to make that clear. It's not BU's adoption policy, but the policy itself is heavily rooted in character. So ethical use, disclosing the use, and making sure that you're not replacing a skill or critical thinking with generative AI, but instead using it as an extension of yourself. So it's a really cool story that's linked here, and you could read more, but I would say that this is something I would recommend instructors do if you have the capacity to do with your students. Is, what do you want the policy to look like? Second is Ethan Malik. If you're considering requiring generative AI, this is a really good person to follow. If you're not considering requiring generative AI, don't follow this person, or still follow him because he posts great stuff and he's thoughtful. He's definitely on the we all need to be using generative AI extreme, but an amazing, I would say, innovative person to be mindful of. Now, I want to talk about generative AI policy activity we're about to do right now. So I looked on the internet, and by I looked on the internet, I mean one of my wonderful interns, Nathaniel, who might be watching, Googled and researched a ton of AI policies and put a huge document together. And it was awesome. I got to see a spectrum. I got to see a policy link for 5 different types of sentiments towards AI. The only issue was I felt like they were a bit vague. I also felt like they were lacking humanity. And so this is what I felt like was really missing, according to us, being Packback and me as a human. They lack direct instructions of how to cite use of AI with modeling. Now, the reality is there is no set way to cite use of generative AI. Like we have an MLA guide, we have an APA guide for citations. That doesn't exist for generative AI. So just tell your students what you expect and model it for them. Why or why not it should be used in certain contexts. If you don't want your students creating outlines with generative AI, tell them why. If you're cool with it, but you don't want them coming up with the title for the paper with AI, tell them why. Give recommended and preferred AI platforms. I know with GPT, if a student has a bot log, a chatbot log, they can take the link and share it with you. So I'd really recommend that when students disclose the use of generative AI, you ask for the log link. And GPT definitely does that. I don't know about Claude yet. Disclosure of the newness, flaws, and ever-evolving nature of generative AI. ChatGPT in December is so different than ChatGPT today. GPT-4 feels like magic, and the old GPT feels like magic, right? So this is what we really want policies to be mindful of and to include. Again, the other thing I said is humanity. If you tell a student not to do something and then walk away, they are going to do it because they want to figure out why they shouldn't do it. If you tell students why they should not do something, they are less likely to press a boundary. They might still do it. We can't force them to do anything. We cannot control them, but we can influence them through knowledge and discussion and vulnerability and authenticity. So let's talk about this workshop. I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes and we're going to do this silently and individually. I'm going to share a link in the chat momentarily, not quite yet, because I don't want to give everyone the shiny thing right before I give instructions. What you're going to do is go to page 2, part 3. So this is what I'm going to send you. You can download it, by the way, by clicking the 3 dots and clicking download, but I'm going to give you this link. You're going to go straight to page 2, part 3. So that's here. What we've done is created a template that has 6 sections. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right. So what you're going to do is come up with a blank sheet of paper. Maybe it's a Google Doc, maybe it's a Word document. You're going to copy the header onto the blank document. So this first header is generative artificial intelligence use policy, right? And then what you're going to do is answer the questions or address the prompt under each section header. Now, we've provided examples based off of sentiment. You can copy and paste those and modify as needed, trim down, add context, or you can write your own. So I'll give you the first example. The first section of this policy should answer the question, why does this course have a generative AI policy? We've given an example of prohibitive, flexible, and required. You don't need to do every section, nor answer every single prompt and question provided. Do what's useful for you. You might end up only using 4 of the 6 sections, or maybe you use all 6 sections, but you combine them into 3. The last step of this is review. Make sure the policy you've created aligns with the university provided policy. Your policy at the university level might not ban generative AI. So you have to be very mindful of that as you're coming up with your own course policy. You have to make sure there's cohesion. Again, I'm going to set a timer for 10 minutes. You're going to work on this activity. What Ryan and I will do during this activity, we're going to go off camera, we're going to mute ourselves, but we will monitor the chat and the Q&A feature. We're going to come back after 10 minutes and then do a live Q&A where we'll answer questions. But during the 10-minute work time, we're not going to answer any questions live, only in the chat and the Q&A, because we want to make sure we're not distracting folks. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and drop this link, share and get the link for everyone. I'm putting in the chat right now. Here's the activity. Sometimes PDFs can be difficult to copy and paste from, so just keep that in mind. I apologize, but PDFs are pretty. I just put that in there. Again, it'll open up as a Drive kind of document. Press the 3 dots and then download. All right, I am pulling up my timer right now. I'm setting it for 10 minutes. If you have questions, put it in the Q&A feature. We'll either answer it live or just via chat during this. Doesn't say you have access. All right, let me see if I download this, if I can share it in the chat. Oh, heck yeah. All right, I just shared a PDF in the chat. I just got very excited about that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go off camera, mute myself, 10 minutes. All right, you may still be working on this policy, but I want to just briefly pause for questions that I've seen in the chat that I want to answer, and then also point to some additional resources. So first and foremost, if you want to share the activity from the day, the deck, the recording, the guide, here's what you're going to do. If you go to packback.co/webinars, this is today's webinar. Yeah, today. Register for this workshop. So filling out this form will send anybody who fills out the form at some point, whether it's tomorrow or a week from now or 3 weeks from now, the recording to the session, the guide, so the PDF, it'll be downloaded, a certificate of attendance, and then also the deck that we've used today. So if you want to share this with colleagues, this is going to be the thing to do. And packback.co/webinars, everything is on there and accessible. So I just wanted to make that clear. And please share. I always used to say when I was teaching, good teachers borrow, great teachers steal. And what I've loved most about these workshops is the sense of community that we're building and learning from one another and being able to understand other perspectives. So want to just go through some questions here, and Rye, we can answer them together. I don't know, whatever works for you. But let me go through first. I want to have my students, this is, I think, more of a statement from Janet, which is, I want to have my students critique results from generative AI. For example, pay attention to when GPT hallucinates and creates incorrect info on non-existing articles. Please address how this may help students address this, understand use and policy of generative AI. So Rai, you can share your 2 cents, but for me, what I'm thinking is when your students are disclosing the use of AI, they might even be able to just document for you where they had to fix errors, hallucinations, or poor quality responses. And Rai, what do you think when you're thinking about the act of checking AI?
Yeah, I mean, I love that idea for lots of reasons. One, I think it just kind of is an opportunity to teach the students how to use the tool, but also how the tool works. It's a great kind of opening to that conversation as well. But yeah, you can put that in your policy in places like, I think section 2 is what I said, where how we're going to use it, but then also in the section that talks about data security and privacy as well.
Absolutely. Another really great question is, if we encourage or require students to use generative AI platforms, is there a danger we're providing their ideas, skills, and language for free as a fodder to train these tools? So it depends. For me, it's why I wouldn't necessarily require use of generative AI, because I wouldn't want to force my student to do something they weren't comfortable doing, like giving their data to generative AI. But that said, I don't know these policies well enough to know if there are certain generative AI options that do not use any data from a user into their further database. So Rai, I don't know if you have any thoughts or if you've heard anything here.
Yeah, I think I answered this in the chat, but basically, you know, I think if we're encouraging students to use these as tools for support, we're not running that risk because they're not going to be putting their original content ideas specifically into these chats, but they're asking for support with their content ideas that they'll be developing outside of the tools.
Yeah, so it's almost like if they're a student and they want feedback on their writing, maybe tell them, hey, if you put in a huge writing sample, it might train off your data. But if you say, hey, explain Beowulf to me like I'm 5, that's fine. You're not giving them any new information. I think also too, what I always like to do is whenever students or anyone has an issue with data, I just ask them what apps they use most often. And then let's go look at the data and security of those apps, because I have noticed folks be totally fine with using apps that 100% mine your data. And then not want to use ChatGPT because it, you know, is everything you put into it, it's learning from. So it's kind of like, yeah, it's a sticky one. And you know what? There are a lot of court cases right now about this. So I think right now we can only do our best with the information we have. And it's going to change and evolve because, yeah, some people are starting to put together lawsuits, let's just say, against these these big tech companies. I'm trying to think if there's any other good question. And Rye, I want to hear this from you because I answered the question. I teach online asynchronously. A colleague at my community college said online courses are dead. His point that without human-to-human contact, generative AI has no use, or sorry, has no guardrails. Is he right?
Oh, yeah.
No.
Tough one. How did you respond in the chat?
So I'm in an online course right now, not one through university, but one through LinkedIn, because I wanted to learn a skill I don't have. And I don't have an instructor at all. It's self-guided, self-paced. I watch videos, I read, and I answer questions, and then I get the answers to the questions. I want to learn. And online learning is the best for me because I work, however many hours a day, and I like to do my online course on the weekends or at night. And I wouldn't enroll in a college course right now because I'm also trying to do a very economical option, right? This was free. So I think we have to keep in mind that students who are in online learning settings are often not there because they want human interaction. They're there because it's best for their schedule. They can still acquire knowledge on a flexible schedule. It works for them. Maybe they're even trying to avoid human interaction because they're introverted. So I kind of think, like, is differentiated learning dead? And I don't think so.
No, exactly. Of course not. Yeah, I don't think it kills it. I mean, I think it forces instructors and maybe even like curriculum designers to really flex and figure out ways to bring humanity into those asynchronous spaces.
Yes. There's a good question in here. Explain in terms of a 5-year-old, aren't we teaching college students? So here's what I will say. I'd like to think I'm a smart person. I have a chemistry degree. I was in a lot of AP science classes, AP math classes. I really struggle reading literature not from this century. Shakespeare, when we went through my very first AP English class, I had to read Shakespeare and Homer and all of these things that I struggled. So I'd read a page, had no idea what I just read. I'd reread the page, had no idea what I just read. And I would have to go to Spark Notes. I'd have to read the summary of the chapter. Then I could go read the book and actually understand what was happening. My brain had such a hard time reading that style of writing and that style of text. So what I have found, especially now that I'm trying to learn more about venture capital and finances, explain it to me like I'm 5, explain it to me like I'm 10, explain it to me like I'm 15. Now explain it to me like I have graduated with a degree in econ. And you scaffold. It's like student self-scaffolding. So I think it really depends, right? If they're only trying to get a 5-year-old's perspective of Shakespeare, maybe that's a problem, but maybe it'll help them get there because I needed that.
Well, if that student is bringing that explanation to the class, I think it's a great way to spark conversation between the student and the instructor. How is ChatGPT explaining something like I'm 5? How are you explaining something to me like I'm an adult? Where are those things overlapping? Where aren't they? I think that's honestly just a really fun conversation to have in a synchronous course.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we got some good questions coming in. So with that, we're at 12:23. Everyone should have the guide if you were unable to get access to it. It was in the chat in a few different times. Want to just give you some resources. So again, we're going to reach out with a ton of information after this. So if you registered, if you're here right now, you're going to get resources. If you or a team member fills out that registration form, yes, the webinar has already happened, but we'll actually just send you the recorded materials. Technology is so smart these days. But please email curious@packback.co if you do, let's say, if you attended a past webinar and you want a certificate of completion, or if you want access to previous webinar documents. Also, if you're just curious to learn more about what Packback does, which is using AI to teach students how to fish through good old-fashioned instant feedback and give instructors some time back with helping scale things like academic rigor and feedback, reach out to our team. We're happy to talk to you, but the intention of today is really opening minds, opening hearts, and making sure that we're all alive and thriving this fall is what I should say. So with that, I figured I can ask the panelists to just give some final thoughts here. Rye, if you maybe want to just give a final thought, whether it's your own perspective, a word of advice, or just from someone who loves education and supports educators.
Yeah, I would say my word of advice in this moment, July 2023 pre-fall term, is to stay open-minded and to stay on the pulse of AI in the upcoming weeks. so you can best prepare yourself for the next term.
And then Cynthia, I know you're off mute or you're on mute and on camera, so I'll go. And then if you want to give a closing remark, Cynthia, but I think my closing remark, and I've said this in previous webinars, so I'm going to plagiarize myself. Right now, we have an opportunity to learn at the same time our students are learning and learn the same lessons. And we have the opportunity to learn through discussion and discovery and Reed Dixon, who I just saw in the chat, learn through play and experimentation. And we don't always have that as a gift. And it is a gift. The fact that you might not be an AI expert is not a weakness. All right, that is an opportunity for you to learn alongside your students. And what a way to build authentic engagement and buy-in, because the students who you're vulnerable and transparent with and say, why don't we figure this out together? They're going to commit to you as an educator, and they're going to give you more than if you say, hey, I don't understand it, we're banning it this term. And again, GPT and generative AI is not right for everyone's course and everyone's discipline. I am in no ways want to make anyone feel behind or little if they're not allowing use of generative AI. It might not work for your course. It might not work for your course objectives, and then it's a-okay. But again, I still think we can have conversations with our students about it. Why isn't it okay in this course? So yeah, that is my final thought. And maybe it's the optimistic person in me. Ryan knows me well, that I'm gonna always try to see the bright side in a situation. And sometimes it's a problem. I just need to vent, but let's just see the bright side in the situation.
Thanks, everyone. I would just say it's been very exciting to watch the chat and just see how robust the discussion has been there, and really appreciate everyone coming today. We're very interested in hearing from you, Packback and the League, and hearing from you about other aspects of this generative AI excitement that we're going through that you'd like to know more about, or that you'd like to have more conversations like this about. So please let us know, because we're definitely committed to this work. We've got, as Kelsey has said, we've got lots of things planned already. And we look forward to seeing you again at webinar number 3 in this series. So thank you.
Well, thanks so much for coming. Again, if there's anything more you would want from us, just let us know. You can put it in the chat. We download the chat and read it afterwards. Any outstanding questions, throw them there. Otherwise, thank you so much, panelists, for joining. Thank you for engaging. I hope you found this helpful. And if there's anything more you want, let us know. And in a month-ish, we'll be doing lessons on teaching students about generative AI. So we'll get into the weeds of teaching, which makes me very happy. All right, have a great Thursday, everyone. Have a wonderful last July weekend before we head in August. Hey, Leslie Hendon. I haven't seen your face in a while. Sorry, I got really excited. Leslie's been a longtime Packback user and used to answer her phone as Taco Bell, which I always thought was amazing. So, all right, I'll see everyone later. Have a good one. Set my share. Bye, everyone.